Hello everybody, welcome back to The Question, where you have the questions and I have the answers. And today I am answering the question that is on everybody's mind after this weekend is, what are my thoughts on the attempted Trump assassination, as well as just the political climate of America today? But before we begin, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, share if you are new. And just a reminder that I will be linking the GoFundMe to Akrim Nabil in the description of this video. Akrim Nabil is a Belgian Palestinian man who is trying to raise money to get his family out of Gaza, just to get them to safety. I know we've gotten one family member out already, but it would be amazing if we could continue contributing to get his entire family to safety. With that being said, let's get on to the video. So for those of you who don't know, but most of you probably do, on Saturday, there was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump at his rally in Pennsylvania. I'm just gonna put it out there initially. I'm very surprised that this has not been tried before, and I'm honestly very distraught that the shooter missed. I know that there has been a large outpouring of sympathy, of we're glad he's okay, political violence is wrong. I do not share these sympathies, and I will explain why as we get on into the video. But it has been honestly really frustrating that the vehement hatred I think so many people have had for this man is now being quelled under this like political politeness of like, we would never wish this on anybody, violence is never the answer. And I think this is a very privileged position to hold when, as has been pointed out, like, politics is violence. This person has called on the explicit violence of a number of communities in the United States, has taken actions as president as well as no longer president to make demographics feel unsafe and be subject to police violence, to hate crimes, to whatever, who has openly called for the genocide of the Palestinian people. And so I don't think it's right to say that we should condemn political violence and then not condemn the violence that is done and that is inherent to politics, especially his politics. Because all violence perpetrated by geopolitics, by the United States, by I think, is political violence. And so I think it's really hypocritical and really privileged that a lot of these people who are the same activists who are not calling out Israel's continued violence to the Palestinians are saying that, oh, political violence is wrong, but then also this is the same nation with a lot of the same people in charge who then went and overthrew violently and led assassinations on Latin American, Middle Eastern, South Asian political leaders and activists. I think it's incredibly hypocritical and just virtue signaling at this point to say that, oh, political violence is wrong, we should never do this does not encourage behavior, when it's like, you can turn around and do this and apparently that's fine for the sake of democracy. But somebody getting fed up with the demagogue that is Trump and the state of our nation, he's not allowed to commit political violence, even though we've basically as a nation been so censored to what we can and cannot say in terms of opposition to our government and to the policies happening. We're basically very powerless here, and violence becomes a language of powerless people when protests are no longer heard. And I think we've heard and seen and witnessed what the nation and what these people, Joe Biden included, are willing to do to quell protest, peaceful or otherwise. And to keep the ball rolling of important things that is happening with Donald Trump is, on Monday, he announced who his vice president will be if he wins, which devastatingly he's most likely going to, and that is going to be the Senator of Ohio, J.D. Vance. And honestly, when I saw that, I was terrified. I was actually terrified for a number of reasons. JD Vance is a very tricky person in the context of just the Republican Party, specifically Trump. He has denounced a lot of what Trump has done in the past and really called him out to be like, he's not a politician. He is just a crazy person who's been given a lot of power. And I agree with that. That being said, JD Vance is a Christian nationalist. He's a white supremacist. He is explicitly all of the things that we believe Trump to be. However, he is more dangerous. And I pointed this out to my friends because unlike Trump, who will basically say whatever with no actual knowledge to do anything, I'm of the belief that Trump has no ideas or convictions of his own. He kind of just sensationalizes politics. He has the charisma, and people who follow him worship him like God. And so that makes him incredibly dangerous. It makes him more dangerous, I think, than anybody else we've ever had as president or anybody else we've ever had in US politics, because the people who follow him worship him like a god. And it doesn't matter what he says or what he does, they just keep finding biblical excuses to follow him. And I think all of this negative stuff happening to him has only increased that rhetoric. I mean, we see after he got his 34 felony charges, people were like, oh yeah, well, Jesus was a criminal too. They hung him on the cross and he's, our savior. Like just the direct comparison of Trump to Jesus. And then his rallying image that is now being shared everywhere from him not getting assassinated, it once again invokes this martyr, marginalized underdog fight, which he's not, but he makes it seem like he is. He's very good at propagandizing. He's very good at being this God figure, but he has no ideas of his own, and that's why Project 2025 is so dangerous and why JD Vance is so dangerous, because all of these, I'd say, smaller politicians, these governors, these senators, these House representatives have conviction. They're not puppet heads. They're not God figures. They're not somebody to be worshipped. They have actual ideas and convictions. And it especially worries me that JD Vance, being as dangerous and as dangerous as he is, I mean, he wants to overturn divorce laws. That's how Christian nationalist he is. He's thinking of things that we haven't even thought to worry about. And he fully believes in Project 2025. And 2025, I don't believe that was Trump's plan. It's not. I bet you he's never even read it. He has no idea half of what is in Project 2025. He goes up there and he talks about it, but he doesn't know. Because that's 1,000 pages, and he's not going to read 1,000 pages. I don't think he's ever actually read a book in his life. But he can get up there and be something that people love while people in the background are doing Project 2025. But the issue with JD Vance, and the thing that I had to explain to my friend, because I said that what concerned me the most is that he is half of Donald Trump's age. And what that signals to me is that if Donald Trump dies, which either through an assassination attempt or just old age, because let's be honest, he's only 3 years younger than Biden, and so if we're all complaining that Biden's too old, Trump is also up there. If Donald Trump dies, JD Vance takes over. And it's not just he's taking over the presidency, it's he's young enough to continue being in some kind of political office for a good, if we're looking at Biden, 40 more years. He can carry this movement a good 40 more years. And that's what concerns me the most. And because he is so different from Mike Pence, who was not, I'd say, as convicted, would not say as public or outspoken as JD Vance has been being a younger individual. And so that was terrifying. That was terrifying, especially since we don't have a united left anymore, I would say that we don't. The era of the united left that we saw during the 2020 election is gone. It is dead. And I think that is ultimately what is going to lead Trump to a victory. And I think a good portion of the divided left has accepted that. And let me explain why. So I've been talking about this for a while, and if you follow my TikTok, you see me talk about this, but I have continuously pointed out and complained that Trump is going to win, which everybody in the left sees as a definite loss to America, as a definite threat to all marginalized identities, a threat to the world even, a threat to democracy, a threat to everyone's daily existence. We can all agree that Trump is a threat, Project 2025 is a threat, and this new era of MAGA republicanism is a threat. However, my complaint is that there has been no collective backing of one politician, whether it be the Democratic Party with Biden or Kamala or whoever, whether it be the Abandoned Biden movement with Jill Stein or Kamala or Claudia de la Cruz or someone else. There has been no rallying, no unified rallying behind one person. There's only been a rallying behind either vote blue no matter what or abandon Biden. And by abandon Biden, effectively abandon the Democratic Party and the two-party system. And to me, this seems like a divide between the far left, the radical left, and the more moderate left. And here's why. And this divide has everything to do with Israel, Gaza, and just the priority of politics, as well as I think the experience, because I think there also definitely is, to a degree, a racial divide. Like, for example, a lot of the activists that I've seen condemning political violence and condemning the attempted assassination of Donald Trump have all been white, queer people. Whereas a lot of people of color, both queer or not, have been like, the fact that this failed is the most dangerous thing ever because it catapults him into the spotlight. We really need to destroy this system. And a lot of people have been like, you know what? Fuck him. He should be dead and stuff like that. And just like, you can't, as I said, you can't condemn political violence and then not recognize the inherent violence of politics that a lot of people who do not look like us have to go through and endure. And I think that's something, honestly, just to get a bit sidetracked, is something that we've all forgotten, especially in the context of Gaza, is that historically, the revolutions that we have been raised on have been with violence. Not to celebrate violence, but we can't celebrate a day, you know, the 4th of July, which was won through violence, through a war. We can't learn about, in a positive light, the French Revolution without acknowledging that, like, the guillotine exists. And there was a bunch of working class people who said, eat the rich, and decided to cut their heads off. We can't learn about the Haitian Revolution without, you know, in a positive light, without recognizing that this was a very bloody and vicious revolution of enslaved persons and freed Africans to kill off their masters and to kill off the white ruling class. Like, we can't learn, celebrate, and acknowledge these histories and then condemn other people for also engaging in these acts for their own liberation. Once again, not to celebrate or necessarily condone what has been done, but also it's very hypocritical to suddenly be like, well, actually, you need to liberate yourself in a moral and ethical way. Because, as I said previously, violence is the language of the unheard and the unseen. I always say protest is the language of the unheard and the unseen, but we tried protesting and protesting didn't work, and so violence is what is happening now. There's like a scale where it's like you go through the process doesn't work. You tell people the process doesn't work, nothing changes with the process. So you protest the process and you get violently put down by military grade weaponry and policing. And so then you get your own military grade weapon and policing because violence is the only language, apparently, that the oppressors know. And so you meet violence with violence. And I think that's something that we tend to forget, is that these instances of political violence are not happening in a vacuum. And as I said before, it's also very hypocritical. Is like, we accept when governments do political violence as like, oh, this is something that governments do. And then the people do violence to the government, and it's like, oh my God, how could this even happen? It's like, because they've had to sit here and be violently oppressed for who knows how long. And I don't know the reason why this man decided to wake up and shoot Donald Trump, especially since he was a registered Republican. I have no idea what was going on in his head. I just know that a lot of people are upset with Trump and are worried about him getting reelected, including other Republicans who don't fall into that ultra right-wing ideology which he represents. And it is a very privileged position. They said it's majority white, queer, white people saying that political violence is wrong, when it's like, no, you've just never had to endure it. I think especially coming from white, queer people, it's very telling that we are the ones condemning political violence, when it's like, we come from a movement and we enjoy the privileges that we have now and the rights that we have now because of violence, because of a revolt, because of throwing bricks through windows. And it's like, how many of you here, were that to happen again, be willing to fight a cop and throw a brick through a window? Because you're still too ingrained with the system. And that's the people who are pushing for abandoning Biden and abandoning the two-party system. That's what they're at. That's the point in where they're at, is that even if Biden is a better alternative to Trump, and he definitely is, if we're only looking at these two options, he is the way better option, but he's still not doing good. He's still enacting violence against these most marginalized communities, both abroad and in the United States. You know, Black Americans are still subject to police violence way more than white Americans. He is still condoning the militarized police coming into Colombia and violently arresting students. He is, still sending money to Israel to genocide the Palestinians. These are all things that he continues to do, even if he's not as overtly racist and overtly problematic as Trump is. These are still actions he's continuing to take. And so by choosing to abandon Biden, it's like, this is indicative of so much more. It's not just Palestinians as separate to us. It is Palestinians, it is Native Americans, it is all people of color, all queer people, because eventually it always gets back to you. And if they're okay hurting these people for their own interests, who else are they going to be okay with hurting when their interests change? And so it's a refusal, it's of being fed up, and it's a refusal to participate in the system that ultimately has no good outcome for the people who are being the most hurt by it. And I think it's really shitty that white queer people aren't listening to this and aren't understanding it. And so I think this issue really has divided the left, and that's the reason that Trump is going to win, is because the people who are pushing for an abandonment of the two-party system are like, we can't do this anymore, because even if Biden wins, we're not going to have the same rights. He's not going to be fighting for us specifically. He fights for few marginalized people, but he's not going to fight for everybody because he doesn't know how to. He's ultimately not interested in it. He just knows that he is slightly better than Trump. And then you have the people who are pushing to back Biden or back whatever Democratic nominee they come up with, because they view it as the safer option of, it's like, well, we have a better chance of beating Trump if we do this, and it's going to divide us if we choose to do this. And it's like, no, what's dividing us is the fact that we can't decide which to do, or the fact that we won't try to understand the other. And I think that's something that was pointed out, is that there isn't an effort to try and understand why people want to abandon Biden. I saw a post by a very prominent trans activist, and she was like, well, it's not just a lesser two of evils, like Biden is genuinely better than Trump. And this is correct, but as people pointed out in the comments, She never once mentioned foreign policy. She never once mentioned Israel Gaza. She mentioned Ukraine, but she didn't mention Israel Gaza or anything in the Middle East or anything happening in Africa or Asia that the Biden administration has agreed with the Trump administration on. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that people who are choosing to abandon Biden have been continuously victimized by the two-party system and by both of these men for years. And the other people are ultimately more concerned with their specific rights and talking points than the actual action and outcome. Because they said it at the debate. You know, the moderator was like, hey, like, conditions have not improved for Black Americans in the United States. What do you have to say for this failure to improve their condition? And rather than answering the question, Biden just goes, well, actually, they have improved. Like, he's not dedicated to it. And while he's not the worst, like, he's not Trump, he's not God either. You know, he's not Jesus. He's not going to come and save us. He's probably going to die in office or have a stroke. And then we have Kamala, and Kamala definitely doesn't have a great record of actually fighting for people because she's a career politician. People like her more because she's young, because she's a person of color, because she's a woman. And that's how you get into identity politics, where it's like, yes, we need somebody of these demographics in charge, but we also need somebody of these demographics who is going to fight for reform because of those demographics, not use them to get into places of power and then celebrate that while not doing anything to benefit these communities. And yeah, it's really frustrating, but I think also, as I said earlier, the people who have chosen to abandon Biden, I think, have begun to accept, or at least I've begun to see an air of acceptance that Trump is going to win the election again. I think at this point they're past trying to unite the left behind other people, because they are fed up. They're not only fed up with the right, they're fed up with the moderate left. They're fed up with white queer people who enjoy a privilege of whiteness, the kind of people who go and buy the Target Pride collection and celebrate the Pride, you know, like parades, which are very corporatized and monetized. They're fed up with that because they got their rights, they got their happy ending, and then they called it quits. And they don't have the same empathy or effort to continue decolonizing or like unlearning their prejudice and their position, and instead cling on to the fact that, oh, they're born in a feminine body, or they're queer, or they're whatever, and they don't look after that, and they can't accept the more radical ideology that goes underneath it. And so I think it's not only a fed up with the right, but it's also a fed up with those people who seem to be incapable of understanding the distress that the abandoned Biden movement supporters are in, and the anger that they feel, and whatever. And in a way, it's like the moderate left is engaging in its own form of tone policing, because it's saying like, oh, like, yeah, it's bad, but like we need to settle for Biden again. When it's like you're not hearing the fact that people are extremely discontent with him, and that's something that should be validated, especially if we are dedicated to like BIPOC success, BIPOC queer empowerment, disabled empowerment, indigenous land back. Like, this requires more radical forms of change, because we are in the late stages of a Christian nationalist, capitalist society. We can't afford to be moderate anymore when the threat is this big, and they're telling us this is this big, and we're not listening to them, which sucks. But they've decided to accept that Trump is going to win, and instead of trying to plan what to do when he does, and this looks like implementation of mutual aid, of small communities taking care of each other, and basically, rather than pushing for large systemic reform, making sure that our own communities are in order first. And I think this is reflected in a lot of the third-party campaigns that we see, like I know for one with Claudia de la Cruz, something that was very controversial, she said that she wanted to end all aid to Ukraine, which I thought was really interesting because that's something else that the Republican Party has been running on. So I'm like, if this person is very radically left, why is she also trying to end aid to Ukraine? And I think it's also just like making sure that the United States is in order first, because we're trying to play on this global scale when we're also experiencing these disasters ourselves. And so it's like prioritizing our stance with the world rather than prioritizing the health and safety of our people. And it's hard when the United States is not a monocultural, mono-ethnic place to balance this responsibility, because not only are you supposed to be taking care of Americans, you're taking care of the places where they come from, because all Americans come from somewhere, and you need to figure out how to make everybody happy, and to make everybody happy, you're going to make nobody happy. And so I think that's what's being pushed more, is just being able to take care of your own community and defend your own community until there is enough coordination to fix the system or destroy the system and make a better one or something. But I think at this point it's really moved from we can fight this, we can change it, to even the people we thought were our allies don't actually care to listen to us and our experiences. And so we're accepting what we cannot change, especially since now it's been reinforced to high hell that Trump is God. And there's no way that they're going to be able to dissuade his voters from voting for him. And there's enough distrust of Biden because of his age, because of his mental abilities, because of his handling of Israel-Palestine, because of his handling of every single thing else, that he's most likely going to win. And there's not much this late in the game that can be done. Because these two sides are not going to compromise on their beliefs, I don't think. And so that's why I say that there is no united left anymore. It's just division. And I know I made a video a while ago about how the Republican Party was dividing between MAGA Republicans and regular Republicans, but I don't know if the division is as staunch as the left's is, just because I'm not in the right, I'm not in those circles, and I wouldn't know. But I don't know if it's enough for Republicans to actually divide and not vote Republican or vote for Biden. I ultimately don't know how this election is going to turn out, but it does seem like Project 2025 is going to be implemented, is going to be in place. And that, I think, puts a lot, as I have said, on the Democratic Party on the left as well, is that we are not united enough. We are not planning the same that the Republicans and the right wing and the Christian nationalists have. And that sucks, because ultimately there is no real right or left either. There's just right or left beliefs in different things. And I think that's what's destroying us, is that we all have a different definition of what left is supposed to be, and we're all left on a variety of issues, but we're not all left on everything, because that requires us to interrogate our own prejudices, our own experiences, and our own positions. And a lot of people, even though they say that they are ready to, they haven't, and they aren't as willing as they would say, or they don't know how. And that's terrifying, but that's the reality. That being said, and this is something that I have been reading a lot about for my thesis, it's about how there's a fracturing of the American Jewish community along, once again, Israel-Gaza, and how it's hurting us because we're no longer able to speak as a united voice, and that hurts our credibility and it hurts the power that we have as a community. But it also makes us more representative of the people in our community. And so I think while the left fracturing is going to be detrimental to this election, I think it also puts us in a really good position to have these honest conversations about ideology, about tactic, about experience, instead of trying to unite and compromise and back things and people and politicians and policies that we ultimately don't believe in or agree with out of fear of something worse happening. I think the left, through this divide, has become more representative of the people within it. And I think while we might lose this election, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And that by returning to our communities and having these conversations, we can become more powerful in these groups than we were before, because we will no longer be acting out of fear. We'll be acting out of determination, acting out of strength, and acting out of conviction. And that's what the right has done the past few years. They're not afraid of us. They say that they are, but they're not. Or they wouldn't be planning all of this. They'd be acting defensively. But they're not. This is an actual plan to take over the United States. And we need to come with the same kind of planning, the same kind of conviction, the same kind of trust in each other and within the systems that we want to create. And I think this acting in fear, this acting defensively, this acting as though we are the marginalized is what has been hurting us. And as soon as we can empower ourselves and empower each other to live our truths and to work together to understand, share, and really believe in mutual aid and community, will we be able to come back stronger than we were before. Well, thank you guys for listening to that long ramble. These were just some of my thoughts from what has happened this weekend and what I've been noticing. And as somebody who is a white queer individual, but who has also been, I think, pushed to open my eyes to the privilege that I have, as well as the pain that people are going through. And I'm very thankful that I've been pushed to see this and that I can hopefully use my privilege and my platform to speak out against and speak out about what is happening in the United States to people who are less privileged than myself. With that being said, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your summer. I hope you're able to talk with your communities and be open and honest about your feelings. If you're really fucking happy someone shot Trump, be happy that someone shot Trump. I feel like at this point, it's impossible to be moral in an immoral environment. We have to be making concessions. We have to be figuring out what morality means to us, as well as looking out for ourselves and our community. If you're really frustrated and you've hated Trump and this made you feel good, feel good. You know, feel amazing, because it's very cathartic. It's good. And I'd say really also interrogate these feelings that you feel, and that's a good way of unpacking it, is to really interrogate what your feelings are behind all of this, why that is, and reaching out to somebody you trust to share those feelings. It starts with person-to-person connections, I think, is the basis for community. And I think we need to get better at being vulnerable with each other, not just on these big platforms, but with each other, about how we feel, about what we want to do about it, about what we want to see. Because we can come out on these platforms and grandstand all we want about what we feel and try to reach the masses. But if genuine connections aren't made, then there's nothing. That's not a community. So with that being said, so long and thanks for all the fish. Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes.